Image description. A slide reads unique needs and characteristics of learners who experience deafblindness. Wisconsin Deafblind TA Project, November 12th, 2024, presented by Dr. Susan M. Bashinski.
So first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight for the Empowering Interveners series. This is our first gathering with Susan Bashinski. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. So you'll see along the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A. We just ask people to put their questions in that area, and throughout Susan's presentation, she'll stop and we will go ahead and do the Q&A at those stopping points. However, if somebody needs clarification, we will monitor it. And so if you need clarification at any point in time, we can stop Susan and see if she can provide that clarification. At the end of the presentation, you're going to need to check the chat, because if you're interested in either a certificate of participation or you're interested in RID CEUs, that is where you are going to find those links. And you will use the same link for both of those or either of those. And then you'll see another link because Jen needs to collect data for our grant reporting. And so she'll have a link into a post survey. So you all should have gotten a pre-survey, and then you'll get a post survey at the end. I think that pretty much covers the housekeeping. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Susan Bashinski. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. I've worked in the field of special education for decades, probably a whole lot longer than many of you have been alive, but we won't go into that any more deeply. Worked in special education, and for the last 35-ish plus years, I've worked with learners who experience deafblindness. My thing is deafblindness. I've tried to focus on that, and if I go beyond just deafblindness, I've worked in the field of severe multiple disabilities, and in all of those things, the thread that goes through that's common in all of my research and writing, because I was a college professor at a bunch of different places for a long time, and you have to do writing, you have to do research, blah, blah, blah. We don't like to talk about that. I just want to work with the kids. But the things you have to do to keep your job, I always worked in the field of communication. So the biggest chunk of what we're going to talk about tonight is communication. But I will also suggest to you that's not only because it's what's close to my heart and what I love. It really is the central theme of effective educational programs and effective relationships with kids who experience deafblindness. You might be interested to know, I'm not going to bore you with my history. My youngest learner, when I taught in public schools for a long time, was a State Department consultant for a while. My youngest learner was 6 weeks old. And that was the little dude that got me into the field of deafblindness many, 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 many years ago, probably almost 40 now. His mama brought him into my classroom and handed him to me because I knew I was getting a new student in my class, but I didn't know it was a 6-week-old baby. And mama handed him to me and went, "Here, I'll be back to get him." I'm like, I wasn't a mother then. I didn't know deafblindness then. And it was that moment that said, "Oh, Susan, you got to go back to school. You really got to go back to school, and you got to learn things, and you got to learn them fast." My oldest learner was 22 years old. And that was a kick because that was my first year of teaching when I was 21. So there's that. Taught kids every age in between in public schools and in universities. I had somebody graduate from my program that was 76 years old. So there you go. I'm supposed to be able to help people understand things. So if I've been any good at my job, hopefully by the time we leave tonight, you might understand deafblindness a little bit better. That's enough.
Susan, This is Heidi. I'm sorry, I already have to interrupt. Keith, we have a request if you can back up just a little bit.
So this is our topic for tonight. We'll start off this series with an examination of the unique needs of learners who experience deafblindness, the unique characteristics of learners who experience deafblindness. I think some of these things may be familiar to many of you, but we're going to try to get us all on the same page as we move forward. I would love it if you would use the chat for me, just so I can check it out as I'm able. If you'd put just your first name and your role, if you're an intervener, a teacher, an interpreter, if there's any parents here, would love to know that. And I'll check it as I'm able. I can't check it right now, but just if you don't want to play, you don't want to do it, you don't have to, but it would help me a lot. So thank you for considering that. Okay, 2 mamas, yay. I love you all being here, and all these interveners is fantastic. We value you amazingly. And I want to add my comments to what Heidi said. I just get excited and forget, so I apologize. I am so grateful that you've chosen to spend an hour and a half with us tonight. You've worked all day, you've got families, you've got dinner, you've got all the things you got to do. Some of you may have homework and baths and kids and craziness, and you could do a lot of things other than spend an hour and a half. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for myself, but I'm grateful on behalf of the learners you serve. And most of you are interveners. We've got an outreach consultant, Deafblind project from Delaware, lots of things, but these kids need us to do our best for them and by them. So thank you for caring, and thank you for caring enough to give us an hour and a half tonight. And I'll say that again. Things I like to say, I'll say a lot, so you've been warned, okay? In addition to the PowerPoint that we'll be going through together, and I have provided copies of the slides, so you should be able to access those. If you cannot, reach out to Jen Gettelman or Heidi, and they'll take care of you because I have provided those. In addition to those things, those slides, I've provided 2 additional forms, and when I hit those in my talk, I will call your attention to them. There's an action planning form that I hope you might use. And there's a document called communication reminders that we will talk about in some length, long about 6:45, something like that. Okay, here we go. So, except it won't let me advance the slides that way. So, action plan, form number 1. It's a very simple form. You are subjected to the way I think and the way I do things. When I go to a conference or go to a session, I keep thinking, oh, that'd be great when I go back to my class, or, oh, that'd be great to use with this particular learner. And if I don't write it down, by the time I get home, I lost it somewhere in the sky or on the highway between the conference and my house. So I hope that it's nothing fancy. You don't have to turn in this action plan to Holly, to me, or anybody else. Matter of fact, we don't want it, okay? But just write down if you think that something you see on the slides or something I say or a question somebody else asks speaks to you, please write it down. Even if it's only, I want to talk to this about the teacher, about this with the teacher with whom I work, or I want to talk with this about the deaf educator. Talk about this, get your prepositions right, with the deaf educator. So I hope this will be a reminder for you of things you think might be valuable. So there are 6 learning targets or objectives for this session. I'm not going to read them to you per se, but I think it's important to give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about so that hopefully you have some anticipatory set of what's to come, and then you can say, oh, I don't have to ask that question now. She's going to get to that. So we're going to start with just an explanation of deafblindness. Many of you could probably give this part of the talk, and I understand that. So I ask for your patience, because my understanding is that there's some folks here who probably are in their first year, their first semester, working as an intervener or working as a teacher who works with learners with deafblindness. So we need to all review that and get on the same page with each other. I will look with you at the main challenges that most every learner who experiences DB encounters at some point in time. Yes, every learner with deafblindness is unique. Every learner with deafblindness is different, but there are threads that are common that all these kids share, and we'll look at those. We will look at the critical things for family members and educational team members to do when they're working with, interacting with a learner who has deafblindness. Once again, those are going to be unique to every situation, every context, but there are certain threads that are so important to always try to do. And if our goal is to achieve this 100% of the time, I'm not a fool. We're not going to do it 100% of the time, right? We're human beings. We don't work that way. But we're going to strive for that North Star of 100% of the time. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll do it like 3/4 of the time or 80% of the time. And that's darn good, right? We'll look at communication. We will really dissect communication. We'll talk about 5 or 6 most relevant things, or actually I'll talk about more than that, but I hope when we're done, you'll be able to talk about at least 5 or 6 aspects of the communication profiles of learners who experience deafblindness. We will talk about learning as a process. As a group, how do learners with deafblindness actually learn? And in comparison to kids who are typically developing. And finally, I will ask you to, I hope, be able to talk about at least 6 things that are characteristic of how kids with deafblindness learn. So I hopefully will present at least that many. And so these are the key things for which to watch. And here is a cue. If something's bolded on a slide, that means that's really important to me. And if it's red, and sometimes I use red on the slides, that means it's really important to me. So if you don't want to read all the slides, read the red part or read the bold part. And that's a shortcut for you. So what is deafblindness? These are pictures of real kiddos with deafblindness that I've known through the years, many of them with whom I've worked. And, you know, I hope that as you look at these pictures, you'll see they're just kids, right? Lots of them wear glasses, but not all of them. Several of them have cochlear implants or Baha hearing aids. All these kids have some assistive devices. It's typical for them to look way up close. They hold things close because they can't see. Some of them sign. Some of them use augmentative communication. Some of them use gestures. They go trick-or-treating. They ride bikes. They play t-ball. They play piano. They go fishing. If you can't tell, that's a fish. I mean, they're just kids. And so they share characteristics, but they each have their own strengths and their own needs. Deafblindness is a unique disability. I know as I interact with people and they say, what do you do? And I said, I'm a special ed teacher. What do you teach? I teach kids with deafblindness. Oh, kids who are blind? No. Kids who are deaf? No. Kids who have both deafness and blindness? Oh, so it's like a kid who's deaf and blindness? No, it's not deaf plus blind. It's really, really not. It's much more complex than that, because when you have one of your 2 major distant senses, sight and hearing are 2 of our 3 senses we can use to get information from far, far away from us. Third one's smell, right? But when 2 of those 3 are impaired in some way or missing or something, it affects how you interact with the people in the world, physical things in the world itself. And it's really, many people in our field talk about deafblindness as deaf times blind. I don't know, that's not one of my favorite expressions, but you may hear that. I do know it's not deaf plus blind. It's not a hearing loss plus a vision loss. It's bigger than that. It's more complex than that. You need to come to terms with how you want to explain it to your family, your colleagues, the families of the kids with whom you work. When a family gets a diagnosis, and mamas, I know, I'm not telling you anything, when you first hear your kid has deafblindness, that's a gut punch, right? And you would not be alone if you were to think, he can't see and he can't hear. Oh my God. But that does not what it means. When you say deafblindness, it means that in some way, each of those 2 senses is either reduced or distorted or missing entirely. It's not both are missing entirely. Rarely are both missing entirely, all right? Let's jump down to this bullet point. The majority of kiddos who experience deafblindness, who carry that label around with them, have some degree of useful vision and or hearing. The National Center on Deafblindness estimates that 95 to 99% of the learners with that label have some functional hearing and or functional vision. And that's important for you to realize, okay? It's also important, I believe, for you to understand that this label, deaf-blind, represents a whole continuum. If you work in a school where they have a variety of special ed services, you probably hear about autism as a spectrum. You hear about autism spectrum disorders. Well, we can think of a spectrum or a continuum of needs with kids who have deaf-blindness as well. Because some kids, that very, very few, maybe 1%, max of 5%, no vision, no hearing, nothing. To kids who just have a moderate hearing loss and a moderate field loss in vision. Those are very different kids, right? With very different needs and very different strengths, but they have the same label. I think it's common for us to understand and believe and act as we work in schools that all the kiddos who experience deaf-blindness do struggle in some way with building social relationships with their families, with their peers, with their classmates. They have some struggles with communicating with other people. They have some struggles in understanding the world around them. When your senses are distorted, missing, or funky in some way, that's just going to happen. And in the field of deafblindness, we typically consider this disability to be a disability of access. Access to people, access to communication, access to the world. You'll hear me say this several times tonight. It really is a disability of access, which is severely limited by the ability to gather information. Remember, we said deafblindness involves 2 of our 3 distant senses. Because you don't learn a whole lot by smell, right? You learn if somebody burned microwave popcorn in the teacher's lounge at school. But it's really hard to learn by smell. So these are our 2 major channels for learning. And because those are distorted, missing, partial, access is limited. So let's look at the unique characteristics of kids, unique challenges of kids who have this label deafblind, and then we will stop and see if you have any questions for me. So we'll do this section and then we'll stop. Please bear in mind, as I say, learners with deafblindness almost always experience. That means it's the majority of kids experience this stuff at some point in time. It doesn't mean that every single learner experiences every single one of these things, and certainly not all the time. But these are common, and you'll see them across the population of kids on that continuum of deafblindness. The kids tend to feel more vulnerable than many of the typical learners in our schools or in your families. This one surprises, I don't think this one surprises anybody. This one sometimes does. Most, not all, most kids with deafblindness feel more secure when they're sitting down, or they feel safer when they're sitting down. And if you think about that, why? It makes sense, because when you're in a chair, one, you're closer to the floor, and more of your body is supported because your bottom and your thighs are supported by the chair. Your feet are on the floor. So you've got several body parts that have support from underneath, right? When you're standing, you've got support from the soles of your feet. And lots of kids with deafblindness struggle with balance. That's on the next slide. And when you have your feet and you don't have good balance, that's a little scary. Many kids who really struggle with balance problems, and this is common for a lot of kids who have charge syndrome, they're most secure and safe when they're lying down, and they lie down supine on their back, and they love that position because it's like, oh, this is good. I feel good. I'm safe here. Can they verbalize that to you? No. Can they sign or gesture that to you? Most cases not. But you can tell by their behavior. They relax, their muscle tone lets go, some of their agitation seems to lessen. It just feels good. because you feel vulnerable and you don't trust what's happening. But when you feel the ground under your whole body, or at least under your butt and your thighs and your feet, it feels better. Most kids need longer periods of time to learn about the world. And this is huge. This probably ought to be bolded. And to learn to trust other people. All of us struggle when we meet new people or move to a new city or a new job or a new school to learn to figure out whom we can trust and who we're going to rely on. And trust is a real big issue, right? And who are you going to trust the most? You're going to trust people who respect you. So I hope, if nothing else tonight, folks, and I wish I could see you right now, but if nothing else, I hope that you sense that I think, Susan Bashinski, I think one of the most important things you can do, even if you don't have this particular knowledge or skills of how to help a kid with deafblindness learn, show the kid respect. Show the kid he can trust you. And you are teaching so many valuable lessons if you respect that child or that young adult. It's critical. That's when I get preachy. I'm sorry. Most kids with deafblindness really have trouble counteracting boredom. And you know, when you can't see, or you can't see very well, you can't hear very well, there's not a lot going on because you're left with your body or this little bubble right around you. I don't know about you, but my body and this little bubble around me is boring a lot of the time. So think about that. Lots of times they get bored. And then you see challenging behaviors, right? Why not? You see stereotypy, right? Why not? The kid's got nothing, man. They're trying to not be bored, okay? Most kids perceive time very differently. Lots of people in the field talk about deafblind time, which they say is 2 times as long as our time. I don't know. I don't think there's a magic number, but the kids do perceive time differently. Many learners with deafblindness find it difficult to interpret movement, because if people are moving too much, they might move in and out of the kid's field of vision. They might not hear the sounds that go along with running feet as opposed to walking feet. We have all these other cues to help us understand movement. They don't. This is a big one that teachers of the deaf, teachers of the visually impaired, and those of you who work as aides or teacher assistants for those teachers, kids with deafblindness will almost always fatigue more rapidly than their same age peers because they're working so hard to use what vision they have, right? And especially if they can't hear much, they're having to use their vision for everything, or 95% of everything, and that's tiring. Same thing in reverse. If they have very limited vision, they see here, they see only light, their hearing's better, they got to listen so hard, or it's just difficult. So they get tired. We have to honor that. We have to honor their stamina, their lesser stamina. We have to honor their fatigue. Many kids will demonstrate increased tactile sensitivity, especially around their faces. And they love texture. They loved it. They love enhanced texture. Remember that profile I had of all the kids? They were like feeling things and right up against their eyes. They love that stuff. Learners with deafblindness often, we've just got a couple more slides and we'll get your questions. They often demonstrate difficulty communicating with people in a meaningful way. Difficulty interacting with things in the environment in a meaningful way. They might spin things that aren't intended to be spun. They might lick and mouth things that aren't intended to be eaten. They may be getting great info from those interactions, right? But in a meaningful way, they have really struggle. We have to help them learn. Kids will have difficulty establishing and maintaining interpersonal relationships. I think that's very connected with this how to communicate, because communication is an interpersonal gig, right? They just struggle with all these things. And back several slides ago, we said kids struggle knowing how to interact with the environment, with people in it, and how to communicate with it. There you go. That's what they demonstrate, is difficulty in those things. They have difficulty generalizing. And again, You're going to hear me say this more than once. I'm using the educational psychologist rule that to really remember something, you have to hear it 7 times. So here's the second one. A distorted perception of the world because the information they get from their senses is distorted. They're not getting non-distorted information visually or auditorily. So their perception of the world is distorted from yours and from mine. So we have to compensate for all these things. We have to account for all these things when we try to design programs to help these kids learn. Last slide, and we'll have some questions. Kids will also demonstrate inconsistent responses to visual images. They demonstrate inconsistency in using what functional vision they have left. We already talked about, I gave you a preview on this one, balance problems. Oh yeah. Delays in motor development. Well, sure. When you can't see the rest of the world, you can't hear the rest of the world, it takes you a long time to even learn this thing out here is your own hand. Your motor development is going to be delayed, and so on and so forth. You've seen kids startle, light gaze, use stereotypy, all of these things that we tend to say are challenging behaviors. They're inappropriate behaviors. I hope we take those 2 words out of your vocabulary by 7:30 tonight. So we'll see how that goes. So Heidi, we're going to take a break for a few minutes before we go to the next section. Do you have any questions for me out of the Q&A?
There is nothing in the Q&A.
Okay. Critical actions when interacting with a learner who experiences deafblindness. These are, what do partners need to do, right? What do partners need to do as they interact with these kiddos? And now I can't find a way to move them. Here we go. All right. So we're going to start. When you first meet a learner who experiences deafblindness, what are you supposed to do? I mean, do you not use verbs like see and hear and, try to change up your whole vocabulary? And the answer is no. You speak as you would ordinarily speak. One main reason is you will be more natural. You will be more comfortable. You will be more relaxed. You will be more authentic. And if you are authentic as a partner, that is going to be meaningful for the learner. All right. So basically, treat that kiddo as you would anybody else. Okay. Some of you, if you work as interpreters or interveners, you've probably seen this done incorrectly. So I want to just reinforce you in your understanding that you are correct, that if somebody is talking to the learner with whom you work, that other person should address that kiddo directly, not talk to you as the intervener, not talk to you as the interpreter. Talk directly to that kid, and then the kid is going to get the information from that interpreter or intervener, right? This is probably one of the most important things that is different when you work with learners who experience deafblindness than when you work with other learners, both with and without disabilities. When you approach a learner with deafblindness, it's really important you let him know a couple of things. One, you need to let him know you're there. You're within his sphere. You're within his bubble. You're not hopefully in his face, because we need to be respectful, right? But you're there in case he needs you, wants you. You're available to help. You're available to interpret. You're available to describe. So the kiddo needs to know when you're there. And the kid needs to know who you are. Because if a kid works with an intervener, an interpreter, a deaf educator, a teacher of the visually impaired, a SPED teacher, the kid needs to know when those people are available, yes, but every one of those 5 people is likely to do something a little bit differently, use different words, approach things differently. We all try to learn to hand kids objects in the same way, to interpret the kids' behaviors in the same way. that if a kid throws something, it means I'm afraid of it, not I don't like it, I don't want it. If he throws something, we're all going to treat it like I'm afraid of this. So we try to align how we interpret things, how we interact, but we're not automatic replicas of each other. So we do things uniquely. Kids need to know who you are, and we can do that through personal identifiers. I have one to show you in a little while. When you're available, that's when you enter into his space, and when you leave. If you work with a teacher who, when she's teaching reading, is no longer available to that learner needs to know she's not available, even if she's in the same physical space. It's who's available to help interact and who's not available to help her interact. And for darn sure, if you leave that kid's space entirely by going out in the hall, going to use the restroom, let them know you're leaving. Let them know when you come back, because they need to know they can depend on you. That too is an element of trust. They have to trust that if you've told them, I'm here, baby, I'm here, that you're there. And don't, now sure, we all forget sometimes, but don't forget, try not to forget, all right? If you work as an intervener, you know this. Your job is to describe through either speech, through sign, through drawing pictures, through however works with your learner, describe what's happening or what's about to happen. Very important. I think it's also important to remind ourselves that our behaviors, how we interact with the kids, how we announce we're available, how we announce when we're leaving, that affects the attitudes of that kid toward working with us. It impacts trust, it impacts preference. And if you are huffing around like, yeah, let's change your pants, you think the kid isn't going to sense that? Even if the kid can't hear the change in your tone, the kid's going to feel it in your hands if you handle them a little more roughly. If you are impatient, if you are short, and I don't mean in stature, kids know. And I have a communication reminder about that. So you're going to hear me say that again because it's so critical. It's respect. We have to show respect. Whoopsie, change the slide, Susan. I wish this were my quote. It is not, but it's one of my favorites, and I share it as often as I get a chance to. Jan van Dijk, he was a man from the Netherlands in Europe, and he's one of the few who worked in the early programs for kids with deafblindness. He worked with kids who were deafblind as a result of the rubella epidemic in the 50s and 60s. He talked about we need to invite the child who is deafblind or invite the young adult who is deafblind out. We need to invite that learner out of her own body to join us in the world and to build levels of connections with her. And I think that's just such a beautiful overarching theme, because kids who have pretty severe vision loss, pretty severe hearing loss, they are internal, right? They're just in here. And you've seen little kids, if they have severe losses in hearing and vision, they might sit and just sit like this. They might lie in a fetal position. They just are internal in their own bodies. They may play with their own hand or chew on their own toes, but like I say, even when they're in an ATR position, to know this is their hand out there, that's a big challenge. So, but it makes sense, right? They can't see the world out there. They can't hear the world out there. So it seems like the world is just right here, and we need to get them out. We need to get them out of their own bodies and get them into the world, helping them know it's a safe place to be. And we're going to help them learn how to do that. When you're working with a learner with deafblindness, I did say this a little bit earlier, you want to be in close proximity to her, but respectful. You don't need to be in her face. I shouldn't do that. Like, boom, you don't need to be right here. You don't need to just be hovering. But you need to be close so that she can reach and get you, so that if she makes a sound, you can hear it, so that if she makes a gesture or she does one of these, you can see it, because that's where communication and interaction starts. So you got to be close. How close? I can't tell you. It's going to be different with different kids, but you need to be in close proximity. You need to use multimodal communication. It's one of my favorite words in the whole wide world. We'll talk about that off and on throughout our rest of our time together. It simply means that as you communicate with a kid with deafblindness, please do not use only one mode, which is one form or one way of communicating. With us tonight, I'm pretty much using one. I'm talking, okay? And I'm signing and gesturing, but if you have to see that, I'm sorry. But I'm talking. All right. So you might know that one of your learners with deafblindness uses sign language. Okay, great. But don't use only sign, especially when you're doing new learning, you're engaging in new learning. Support that with objects, support that with textures, support that with keywords. Help that child learn a few sounds, because that learner needs some sounds, because if you're in a totally pitch black situation, the kid could sign like crazy and you can't see it. If a kid uses gestures, talk a lot about gestures, but they need some sounds, they might need some objects, whatever's going on. If kids use augmentative communication devices, that's great, but they break and batteries go dead, and they get put on a shelf or they get left at home some days. Kids have to have some sounds, some words, some gestures, some signs, so they have something with which to communicate. We need a combination. Multimodal does not mean total communication. If you ever heard TC or total communication, which means sign and speak and move around everything you say. No, it just means use a variety, use an eclectic approach to communication. Wait, please wait. We get so impatient, and time passes really slowly when we're waiting. That's one of my reminders we're going to hit again. And provide choices to whatever degree the kid can manage, because we all like to have some choice, right? We all like to have some choice in what happens to us. When you're working or partnering with a kiddo with deafblindness, these are the two main things we're all about. You tired of me saying those yet? Build a relationship with that learner. Build a relationship grounded in trust, and show the learner respect. I would encourage you to implement the communication reminders. We're going there soon. That's your second handout. Implement those things and try to remember these. Expect that that kiddo is communicating with you. I don't know how many times you might have said, I used to say this, thank goodness I don't anymore. Well, he doesn't communicate. He doesn't have a way to communicate. Yes, he does. Okay. What we're saying is that kiddo doesn't have a conventional way of communicating. The kid doesn't have a way of communicating that you understand or I understand, but we have to expect he's communicating with us. More on that soon. Expect communication. Be attuned to the learner. Be responsive. We're going to look at a video about that. Be responsive to what that kiddo does. Try to be positive. Our behaviors affect the kid's attitudes toward working with us. Keep the kid feeling safe. Keep the kid feeling supported. So we're going to watch this video. It's old. I love it. My guess is some of you will have seen it before. Maybe all of you. I don't know. It's a dad with his toddler son who does not have deafblindness. I don't think the kid has any identified disability. They're sitting on the couch watching television. And I want you to watch for things dad does that would serve to be overtly responsive to his toddler son. Remember, I've said to you, you've got to be attuned to the kid. You have to expect he's communicating with you. You have to be responsive to him and be positive about that. I want you to watch for those things. I want you to watch to see how dad takes a turn to keep the interaction going and get his kiddo to express more. All right. So I'm going to click on this. Would somebody let me know if it is not visible?
Did you understand it though? Susan, this is Jen. It is not visible.
I'm sorry, what? Can you see it?
No, we cannot.
Ugh, are you serious? Okay, let's stop. I practiced with this and I thought it was going to work. Okay, let me see. Thanks for your patience. I really want you guys to see this. So, oh my gosh, now everything's disappearing. Hang on. Sorry. Nope, that's wrong. Thanks for your patience. Okay, now I'm going to screen share again and let's see if we can see it. All right, let's see. All right. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
We need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right, don't bring that in. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't break here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. Then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
On for a little bit more, but it's a matter of, I think that that's enough for you to understand what I want you to get out of that situation. In case you had difficulty with the sound or anything, the little guy, he's just babbling. What he's saying isn't recognizable words, right? But did you see from that interaction, dad is attuned, he's plugged into that little guy, he's expecting his son to communicate, he is responsive. What did dad do? If some of you will play along with me here and put in the chat just some things that you saw dad do that we can do when we work with kids with deafblindness who communicate with their bodies and goofy sounds and their behaviors. What could we do that daddy did? Anybody going to be game and show me? No takers on that? He copied the gestures. Yes, Renee, thank you. That was key. He copied the kids' gestures. That is so important. He mirrored behavior. Yes. Andy showed emotions. He was excited. He was positive. He was into it. He turned and talked to him. Thank you, Justin. He made eye contact, very responsive to the vocalizations, Aaron. You got it. Provided time and space. He did wait expectantly. I love that phrase, Brooke. Thank you. He waited expectantly, turned and talked to him. You guys got it. And I would ask you, thank you for playing along with me. And I would ask you, and you do not have to put this in the chat, but I would ask you to look at your own behavior, turn the mirror on yourselves and say, how many times when you're interacting with a kiddo who experiences deafblindness and doesn't communicate in a way that we do, or formal sign or OGCOM, do you do those things? It's really hard. But I question, how many times do you work as hard as dad worked to try to get that kiddo to stay engaged in a situation, to stay engaged in that interaction? All right, so we've got that. You've got the link if you want to show that to anybody. That's what I'm asking you to do. What Daddy did and what all of you who played along with me in the chat did, that was great, and I appreciate your participation. It is really important. This is taking a point we've made earlier, but we're drilling down a little bit more in it now to say, as you're planning how you're going to help a kid with deafblindness learn and how you're going to engage with that kid in school, you have to look at the environment. You have to look at the relationships between you and that child and the other peers in the class. You have to look at communication. This is like the next level down. You really need to take time to figure out how a kiddo is going to receive information from you and other peers, other teachers, and then how the learner is going to perform, what the learner is going to do to demonstrate that he understood something. Because we can't see understanding, right? We can only infer understanding from what the child says or does. So when you are planning and working with a learner in school, you have to figure out two separate things: how he's going to get information from the lesson, the teacher, the peers, how he's going to perform to show you he understands. These may be different modes of communication. He might receive information through manual sign that you as an intervener or interpreter use, but he doesn't sign back. No, he may use body movement to show you he understood, or he may use a picture schedule or pictures or objects to show you. One young man that I will introduce you to here in a little bit, his name is Lance, and he has charge syndrome and deafblindness, and he is a classic example of this. He started in one of my first gesture studies. One of my first forays in communication research was in teaching gestures, and he took off like lightning. It was just incredible what he learned with gestures, and he was in that study when he was 4 and 5 years old. He's now graduated from high school. He's 22. And all through the years in school, his mom, dad, brother, sisters, grandparents, they've all learned to sign. And he takes in information. He receives information through others' sign. He worked in school with an interpreter, and he got information in reading class and math class through signing. He doesn't sign. His motor control is really poor. That's probably part of it. He doesn't like it. He uses gestures a lot, which it's kind of like sign, but it's not, because it's not conventional. Well, some of them are conventional, okay. But he uses an OGCOM device. He uses a touch chat program on his OGCOM device. So he receives through sign and expresses through gestures and touch chat. Totally different. You have to figure that stuff out to know how to teach and help a kid learn effectively. For kids who experience deafblindness, and most especially for kids who are very young with deafblindness, or for kids with deafblindness who others would say doesn't have a system of communication or doesn't communicate, God forbid. But what you're really saying is he doesn't have an organized way to communicate that the rest of the world understands, okay? It's really important, more important, because it's not a conventional communication system. You look at the immediate environmental contexts, you enhance them. You make things brighter, you make things louder, you make things more textured. Not all of the above, but something. You feature materials that the learner prefers. You add in movement, you add in touch, you add in multisensory experiences to these contexts, because you've got to be able to pour in information. Now, don't go overboard. I'm not saying do every single one of these things all the time, because kids get on overload, and we have to be cautious about that. It's pick and choose, talk as a team, talk in meetings, talk in IEP meetings. Which enhancements will we use in the morning? Which enhancements will we use in the afternoon? Maybe they're different. Maybe they're the same. Which enhancements will we use in emergent reading? They may be different than the enhancements we use in art and music, but you have to talk these things through as your teams. With all learners, especially really little ones or those who are older that don't have a well-established conventional system of communication, that means the way the world understands through conventional reading, conventional writing, conventional sign, conventional speech, kids do what they do, and their partners at home, their partners at school, must interpret the behaviors the kids do to derive as much meaning as possible. And as partners interpret these behaviors, what we're doing is we're treating these, what might appear as random behaviors. I would suggest to you most of the time they're not random. We're going to interpret them and treat them as if the kid's doing them on purpose. We're going to treat them as if they were intentional. Earlier, I said kids, a certain child may just pitch things. You give them something or ask them, and they throw things. Well, I think it's a natural response for us to think, oh, he doesn't want that, or oh, he doesn't like that. But if you talk with mama says, oh, he throws things when he's afraid. Different story, right? So we're only going to teach the throwing is, oh, that scares you. All right. And then you respond accordingly to that. Teams have to decide how to respond. But it's like, I don't want it if it takes his whatever's on his wheelchair tray or on the table and just brushes it off with his arm. That might be you don't want it. But if you pitch it, you're scared of it. We have to look at those nuances, and we have to treat them differently as if they were intentional. I was making a home visit with a kid and his family. Kid was, I think, 11, 12 years old, and he was watching TV. His older brother and younger brother and mom and dad were in the room, pretty much adjacent to the kid with the TV, and we were talking. I was making a home visit, and all of a sudden, Jack, the learner with deafblindness who used a wheelchair, just got agitated and started screaming and pounding out, striking at the TV. And I'm trying to think, oh goodness, what happened? Younger brother gets up, walks over, puts his hand on Jack's knee, changes the channel on the TV. Jack calmed down, all cool, everybody copacetic, and the little boy came back. His brother knew that this agitation, strike out, try to hit the TV means change the channel. Please change the channel. I didn't know that. It's certainly not a conventional way, right? Conventionally, we say, hey, can we watch something else? Can you change the channel on the TV for me? Or hold up the picture of the TV like, change the channel. It's not conventional, but it worked for him. And when everybody in the family treats it the same way, you've established with that learner, we got you, baby. We understand your signal. You can impact the world. We're giving you communication power. And over time, if partners, school and home, consistently, repeatedly interpret a certain behavior the same way, it will shape communication. Now, some of you might be saying, well, that's really stupid, Susan, because we can't have this kid getting agitated, beating on the TV every time he wants a channel change. No, but it's a start. It's where you start to say, hey, kiddo, we heard you. We see. You've got the power. You can impact the environment. You can impact your environment. We saw what you want. We respect that choice. We're going to change that channel for you. And gradually you're going to introduce things to shape that behavior. Maybe when he starts reaching out and beating on stuff, you're going to put the remote there, or you're going to put the remote within vicinity of him, and you're going to help him put his hand on the remote. So he's beating on the remote. Still not great, right? But it's a step in the direction of shaping a more conventional response. And then maybe he's going to hand the remote to his brother or somebody else to say, change his damn channel, would you please? I don't want to watch this show. So you shape on the basis of what the kid gives you. You don't stay and be content with what the kid gives you when you start. But whatever the kid gives you when you start, consistently, repeatedly, interpret it the same, you will shape communication skills. We need to get going. I'm getting preachy. Who should be partners? Family members, parents, educational team members, and kids. Don't forget peers, all right? Communication characteristics. When asked what is the singular most important need of kids who experience deafblindness, it's not uncommon for families to say communication, communication, communication. One of the books, the first book written on charge in the entire world, that's the first sentence in the book. It's the single biggest barrier to ultimate success in school. Communication occurs when, and I am reading to you, when one individual sends a message to another, and that message is received and understood as demonstrated through some sort of overt response. Okay? There is absolutely no single person on this planet who does not communicate. Now, please hear me. I'm not saying there's not a kid who can't learn to communicate. No, no, no. I'm saying there is not a single kid who does not communicate. They all do. We may not understand, families may not understand, but they're communicating with their bodies, with their sounds, with their movements all the time. And we have to respond to those things, to potential behaviors that are communicative, so kids can become aware of that power and that purpose. One of my favorite quotes, not being able to speak is, or sign, not being able to sign, it's just that wasn't the original quote, is not the same as not having anything to say. So we've got some reminders. And I have, this is the second sheet that I provided to Holly that she and Jen have provided to you. There's a list of, I think it's 18 communication reminders that I've been building over the last many years, and we're going to look at a few of them together. Everybody communicates all the time. Language is just one means. And there it is again, folks. You have to expect your kids are communicating with you. Please, please, please expect they're communicating with you. Lost my cursor. We need to be attuned. That's one of the reminders. We saw it with Dad, and somebody, I don't remember who it was, commented on that. We need to be in the moment and plugged into that kiddo. I know I was bad when I first started teaching, and I might be helping a kid eat at lunchtime, and I'm sitting next to a friend or one of the paraeducators that work with me, and she's feeding somebody. And I might be feeding, and I give the kid a bite, and I say, "What? Did you watch the game?" No, because when I give her the spoon and turn to say, "Did you watch the game last night?" this little one over here that I'm feeding goes like this, and I missed it because I'm not paying attention to her. I asked my friend about the game. No, I'm going to show respect to the kiddo, and I'm going to give her a bite so that when she does this, I go, "Oh, babe, is that too hot? Is that too cold? Do you not like it? Do you want Mary to feed you?" Whatever the possibilities, you have to be attuned to the kid. Behavior is communication. It is. But are you going to put up a filter that says behavior, behavior, behavior? So when the kid shoves the lunch tray on the ground, you go, "Okay, that's it. You don't get any more lunch. We're taking that away because the kid is acting out and acting inappropriately." No, he's probably pitching that on the floor because he's like, "I don't like that green brown slop again," or "I don't want you to feed me," or "I'm supposed to sit by John and I'm not sitting by John." It's communication. put up a filter of communication and organize those communication behaviors for the kiddo. Just think, what could this kid be saying? I don't want to leave the monkey house. It's at a zoo, sorry. Where's my brother? Where's my mom? Mom went to the bathroom. Where's my mom? I'm hungry. Who knows? The kid could be saying a world of things, right? But it's behavior that is communicative. And here it is again, folks. Repeated interpretation of a behavior over time, consistently, repetitively, will shape that behavior into having meaning. This is what I said you could use as a personal identifier, some aspect you add to your person or a mustache or your long curly hair to tell a kiddo who you are and when you're available. Kids' earliest expression of memories incorporate movement. This is little girl dancing with daddy, or tactile aspects. Well, you're gonna know what a kiddo remembers from his earliest times to be able to share with you. He's probably not going to sign it. He's not going to talk it. He's not going to draw it. He's going to move. Kids might rock like you dance with daddy or try to get on your feet. And you're saying, what are you doing? She's remembering dancing with daddy or these tactile textured experiences. Here it is again. This is Lance. This is the guy. He's learning gestures. He still uses gestures 20 years later. They may experience different ways to receive information. He receives information through sign. He expresses information through gesture and his AAC device. I didn't see anybody in the chat telling me they were a PT or an OT tonight, but positioning and support is essential. They will tell you that whether the kids are in chairs, wheelchairs, whatever, they need a 90-degree angle at their hips. Bottom line, positioning is important. If kids are struggling to hold their heads up, they're not going to be thinking about trying to communicate with you. They're thinking about holding their head up and not falling out of the chair, right? These are communication reminders. They're so important. And I keep losing my cursor. Again, multiple modes, multiple modal, multimodal, just for keywords, because speech generating devices like these, GoTalk, Big Mac, others, they don't work in a swimming pool. They don't work in a bathtub. Batteries die. Kids with cochlear implants, hearing aids, batteries die. Hopefully schools have extra batteries, but they don't always. Things quit working. We've got to have multiple ways to say critical concepts. Do with, not for. Love this one. You have to let the kids actively participate to whatever degree they're able. I love this cartoon. Michael Giangreco did this. After only 2 months as a teacher assistant, Gladys finds her spelling has improved, her math skills are honed, and she has discovered she has artistic ability. And the kid is sitting there saying, but when do I get a turn? Exactly. Kids have to be active to whatever degree they can. Even if you're changing somebody's pants, whether they're 2 years old or 17 years old, if they have to be changed and diapered, at least let the kid hold the diaper for you or go get the diaper for you. And if they can't hold it with their hands, you can help put their hand over the diaper that you placed on their abdomen so they have a part in what's happening. It helps build understanding. Wait, just pause, just wait. We've been talking about this all night. This is the reminder that I said, behaviors affect attitudes. Body language is a two-way street. This is little Lance again, and I have my hands on him here, not to keep him in the chair. I have my hands there so he knows where my hands are, so he can grab them, because he's going to grab them. It's a gesture we were teaching him. He can grab my hand and take it and give me what he wants to give me. This little one, when he's sitting on mama's lap, he feels if mama's tense. He feels if mama's agitated. We use our hands on kids to know about their muscle tone, right? Their respiration rate, right? If they're anxious because their heart is racing. I'm suggesting to you, They sense the same things from you. So please try to remember that. They can't verbalize it like we can, but they get cues from our bodies just like we get cues from their bodies. Never too late to begin. I've worked with parents of kids 18, 19, and then it's too late. We can't build this system for interpreting his behaviors now. He's 18 years old. Yes, we can. It's never too late to start. Today affects tomorrow, but it does not predict tomorrow. And nothing's free. When the kiddo wants something, he's got to do something to get it. Make a sound, generate a movement, touch an object, shift his eyes, shift his body, reach out for you, do something. It's like when if you work with little kids and you give them a snack and people give them this much juice and 25 goldfish crackers. And I'm like, why? You don't do anything, just has to show up, right? Show up at the table, give them this much juice and 2 crackers. Oh, so if they drink this much juice, they want more. They might hand you the cup. They might throw it. They might push it on the ground. I don't care, for starters. I really don't care. They're doing something to say, give me some more juice. They might pound on the table with it, whatever. And then you shape what they give you. You shape what they give you. So before we go to the last section, I'm running behind, Heidi. I'm sorry. Do you have any questions in the Q&A?
I do. So this goes back to some of the touch. So what about ProTactile for access? Does that change the distorted view of the world?
I'm not sure I understand. Let me give it a try. I would say yes, it does, because there is at least a consistent delivery method with ProTactile that the people who use the ProTactile strategies are interacting with the learner consistently to deal with the distorted vision and the distorted hearing. Is that a different way of interacting with the tactile world? Yes, it is. But I think the main purpose of ProTactile, as I understand it, is to systematize the vision and hearing channels. And I don't think that contributes to distortion. I think it helps to clarify it.
Thank you. And we have a question from Anne. How do you explain to behavior specialists the difference between the behaviors of deafblindness versus other learners?
Oh, baby, Anne, you ask $1 million question, because I've had many debates that I talk a lot about put up a behavior filter, put up a communication filter, and I choose to interpret 99% of what kids do as communicative, not as challenging inappropriate behavior. And behavior specialists on the whole don't like that, because they're all about shut the behavior down, reshape the behavior, eliminate the behavior, substitute a different behavior. And I just don't think that's the answer. What I go back to, and it's a hard sell in many cases, I'm not going to tell you your challenge is easy, but I try to say, kind of where we started tonight, that kids with deafblindness, they do not see the world as we do. The sense might be missing, it might be distorted, it might be limited, it might be partial in acuity, in field. He doesn't bring to bear on the world visually what you do. And I go through the same thing with hearing, and I say, all the kids got till we can structure a conventional system of communication, sign, writing, speech, OGCOM, all the kid has is behavior that he can show us. All he can do is act overtly if he's going to get messages to us he's going to get messages to us in any way, shape, or form. That's all he's got. And I've been successful with that sometimes, not all the time. I hope that helps, and I wish you well.
And invite your behavior specialists to our Empowering Interveners series.
Absolutely, baby. Show them these slides and let them get mad at me. Let them say, Susan Bashinski said, I don't care. They can't come find me in Kansas City. It's a big city.
Big city. So here is, and the last question is from Andy Altman. And his question was actually 45 minutes early. That's how smart he was. He was already predicting. He wants to know, when you approach a deafblind learner, is it appropriate to have that learner touch you, so that they can develop a memory and a definition of who you are when you enter a room and when you leave a room. And so I'm thinking personal identifiers.
Absolutely. Personal identifiers are all about it. Personal identifiers can be touch, they can be objects, like the personal identifier was that sequin thing. You can also use touch cues. I've got some beautiful stuff. You know, if I wish I had 7 hours. I'm not going to keep you 7 hours tonight, I promise. But with one family, we set up a system. They all kissed their daughter, but they kissed her all over the place. Now, with family, kisses are good, but it's a touch system. So we got it. So daddy kissed her here, mama kissed her here, brother kissed her here. So they used these touch points so she knew who they were. So to answer in general, Andy, yes, I think touch is critical. I think it's appropriate, with the caution that touch is impacted very much by cultural norms. And we have to be sensitive to culture, the learner's culture, and the culture of the paraprofessional or teacher. Sometimes one gender can't be touched by another gender because it's a cultural thing. I also think we, as people who direct the programs, teachers of the deaf, visually impaired, special ed, we have to be careful that we're not asking our support staff to do things that make them uncomfortable, because that will show and the kids will sense it and it will be ugly and awful. But we have to try to come to some middle ground, because without touch and without movement and touch, the kids may have nothing. And we've got to give them something to hold on to. It's a great question, Andy. I appreciate it. Does that help?
Yeah, and then this last one, I'm just gonna, I have to put my last little piece of feedback in and then you can move on. But
Yeah.
I'll say that, and we have to be comfortable with giving up some of our personal space in order for kids to be comfortable with touch and us being more comfortable with touch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you for adding that. I think it's critically important. Thank you, Heidi. Shall we do the last part? Yeah, you're saying it better be the last part because we're running out of time. Okay, impacts on the process of learning. Here it is again. Deafblindness is a disability about access. Okay, access. Deafblindness is a disability about information gathering. Because it's about access and information gathering, kids have trouble getting information together to use to impact relationships, interactions with the world, so on and so forth. So there are types of learning that we need to think about. There's direct learning, secondary learning, incidental learning. If you've ever had an ed psych class, you've talked about these things, okay? So we're going to take a look at them. And then we're going to buzz through a couple of these slides real fast. Direct learning is hands-on. It's like science class when you do a science experiment, right? Or when you use hand under hand to help a kid tie his shoes. Direct learning. The kid is directly involved in what's going on. Secondary learning makes up most of academic learning. It's by listening to another person teach, watching another person teach or present information. This is big with typically developing kids for school learning. Incidental learning, I know this is something you've heard about. It just occurs automatically, naturally. It's what little kids learn by being alive. If the kid has older brothers and sisters, it's all those things she learns by watching her brothers and sisters, because sensory information is constantly flowing. And that's the way kids learn most of what they learn, period, in life, and a bunch of what they learn in school. So what we're going to see is with kids who are typically developing, the pyramid looks like this. Direct is a small amount. Secondary school stuff, okay, that's the next larger amount of learning, but mostly it's incidental. You just learn without much effort. You learn by being alive. Well, we're going to buzz on through. With kids with deafblindness, the triangle is inverted. And with kids with deafblindness, the best way for those kids to learn, and essential for much of the learning, is hands-on, direct learning. They have to be systematically, directly taught a huge amount, not only in school, but in life, in home, in everything, direct, because they don't have the distance senses. They can't watch by they can't learn by modeling. Secondary learning is difficult because of their combined sensory losses, but sometimes they can pick up some, okay, with specially trained teachers and sensitive interveners and so on and so forth. Incidental learning usually does not occur. And if it does, it's usually not very effective, full stop. So we're challenged by that. So our last section is, okay, what are their unique learning needs and behaviors of kids with deafblindness? Kids with deafblindness typically, again, not every kid, every situation, they can learn these things, but we have to help them learn these things. They lack the ability to anticipate. First this happens, then what happens? First this happens, then. That's why they don't have a lot of trust oftentimes, because the world seems random and chaotic, and it's like, holy cow, what's she going to do to me next? Kids can't predict what's going to happen next. And that's why it's so important that we give kids cues. One of my most things that just gripes my soul more than anything. If a kid uses a chair, have you ever seen this happen? I think I've seen it happen, and I think I probably did it once, but thank goodness I don't do it anymore. And somebody walks up behind the kid without saying anything, takes the kid and boom, pushes the chair. Holy cow, don't do that. If somebody came and did that to me, I'd probably wet my pants or turn around and slug them. No, that's not fair. You have to give the kid a cue. You have to touch them to say, we're going to go. You have to put their hand on the wheel. You have to do something to say, get ready, dude, because I'm going to push your chair. They can't anticipate. They can't predict. We have to help them learn that. Many kids with deafblindness are deprived of extrinsic motivation. What does that mean? They're deprived of curiosity. Why? Easy, right? They can't see the world out there. They can't hear the world. You know, kids in elementary schools and preschools, they hear a siren. Everybody's looking out the window and running over the kids with deafblindness. They can't even hear it, man. They're not curious about it. Little kids who have good balance, good motor, they're 21 months old. They're running around touching everything going, that. They want you to tell them the names of things. Our learners, even when they're older, they can't see those things. They can't hear those things. They don't have that curiosity. And their sensory information is distorted. So it's ineffective as a source of motivation. Have you heard that enough times? So critical. These are different and they're really important. Kids often lack the inability to confirm their own impact on others. You've probably witnessed this. A kid will do something that really, by all intents and objective purposes, is dumb. And the other kids will laugh at him. But the kid doesn't know he's laughing at him. Or kids will walk out of the bathroom or wheel out of the bathroom with this big string of toilet paper, and other kids will laugh at him. They can't see it. They don't know that it's there. They don't know that the other kids are laughing at them. Or they don't, if they do something funny, or they learn to use their Ogcom device and the other kids are cheering and clapping, yay. Well, they don't know because they might not see their other kids confirming their achievement. We have to tell them how their behavior affects other people positively and negatively so they can learn. Most kids with deafblindness don't benefit from being left alone for long periods of time. Leave them alone with toys, they don't even know they're there. Leave them alone with things that you say, well, he's got all these things he could do. Well, yeah, but how's he going to find them, and how's he going to explore them, and what's he going to know what to do with them? And we've already said this with the triangles. It doesn't work. Kids who experience deafblindness typically cannot learn independently from mistakes. Because just as they don't see what impact they have on other people, if it's a positive impact, if it's a negative impact, they can't confirm that. They can't see if the action they made had a negative result or a positive impact on other people. They can't understand if the way they use their device actually spoke the right phrase because they can't hear the phrase. They just can't independently learn from mistakes. So we have to do error analysis, point out mistakes, help them learn from them, help them correct them. This one says might, because sometimes this is not true. But many kids might not benefit from group instruction because watching and listening, those channels are not always available. Sometimes they work. Sometimes, like at the end of the day, one teacher was telling me, oh, Susan, Linda's learned so much because when I say, get your backpack and line up, she does. And I said, okay, show me. And the teacher went, get your backpack and line up. Linda was like a delay. And then she did it, but she watched all the other kids. I said, can I try something? The next time they had to line up the next day, I said, can I try something? I said the same type of phrase with different prosody. That's the rhythm. I said, hey, Linda, what are you going to do that? And go over to the store. She got up, got her backpack because I said the same. She was watching her peers and was 2 seconds behind them. She didn't get it. The best way to gauge what kids' cognitive skills are is by watching the way they remember. And remember, one of the reminders is kids show you how they remember through movement and tactile, textural experiences. Those are the earliest ways. They can show you other ways later. See, I'm getting hurried because I'm getting running out of time. Sorry, breathe. The earliest ways kids show you what they remember is through movement aspects and tactile aspects. So watch for that stuff because it can really be a clue to what that kid might be able to do cognitively. And we expect them to learn. We expect them to communicate. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Kids need to be able to understand concepts through more than one communicative mode. Again, multimodal. We have to enhance the context with movement, with sound, with visuals, with objects, with cues, with gestures, all those things, but not everything all the time, right? Selectively chosen. For every single learning activity, partners of the learner with deafblindness must take time to consider the immediate physical, visual, and auditory context of the activity. Visual field, visual clutter, how much glare, how much contrast, auditory, sound to noise ratio, what's productive sound, what's background noise, what kind of buzz is the furnace and the air conditioner and all those things making. Physical, how's the furniture set up? Have kids moved their desks? Where do they keep their junk all over the floor? Do kids sit on the floor? It's all these things, and we have to take them into account and figure out how the kid's going to get information and how the kid's going to show us they've received information. I just said that, and how the kid will receive information and what the kid's going to do to express information. You've got to take time to plan multimodal communication. Full stop. This is Lance again. This is him in high school. This is him learning gestures because he receives information through sign, but he expresses through gestures, through body movement, and through touch chat, not sign. Reception is almost entirely sign. Expression is these three ways. Okay, so let's leave it at that with the summary statement that learners who experience deafblindness are incredibly heterogeneous as a group. They just are. We've tried to point out similarities of characteristics, similarities of needs, similarities of challenge, but every kiddo is different. And you know, you'll hear it said in regard to kids with autism, well, you've met one kid with autism. Good for you. You've met one kid who has autism. I would challenge you, we can say the same thing about kids with deafblindness. So we have about 3-4 minutes for questions. If you hit me up with questions, Heidi, I'll ask you to read Q&A for me. And this is my information. This is my email. This is my phone number. And if you have any questions for me, you're welcome to contact me. You will have this in the PowerPoint, so I'm going to take it down in just a second. If you do reach out to me, please let me know that you were a participant in this Wisconsin activity. Okay, so what do you have for me?
No questions.
No questions. It's clear as mud. Okay.
So what I do want to say though is if you take a moment to look in the chat, participants,
Yeah.
we have dropped a couple of links. So the first link is we need the WDBTAP survey. So it's very short. It's just a post survey, a follow up. If you would like CEUs or or certificate of participation, then you will still fill out this WISRID evaluation. You have until the end of this week to do that. We cannot extend it. We don't have the power to extend it. So if you want a certificate of participation and or CEUs, that needs to be done by the end of the week, which is Friday, 4:00. And then we also shared the link to the flyer. So if you participated tonight and you thought there might be somebody, your behavior specialist perhaps, that wants to participate in some of the upcoming training series, feel free to share it. And then it is 7:29 and we have a fantastic job, Susan. Thank you so much. And I ditto that. Thank you so much for being here with us. I resonated everything Renee is saying. Thank you so much. Great information, new information, and some nice reminders.
Good. So may I have the floor for 30 more seconds?
Of course.
One more time, folks. I'm not just placating you. I'm not just blowing smoke. I really do appreciate your choosing to join Heidi and Jen and me for this hour and a half tonight. After you work all day, you're tired. You could have made a lot of choices on a Tuesday night, and I'm really grateful that you care enough about the kiddos and what you do and you want to learn, and thank you. We really appreciate and recognize your dedication. So thank you very much. Heidi, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And one final thank you to Keith, our interpreter, and Brady, our interpreter. We appreciate your time on this Tuesday night as well. So everyone have a safe night. I don't have to tell anyone to drive safe, I don't think. So have a good night, and we'll see you guys back here next month for anyone that wants to join us.
The WDBTAP logo is displayed and reads WESP DHH, Wisconsin Deafblind Technical Assistance Project, WDBTAP. The logo and disclaimer for the ideas that work is displayed and reads, the contents of this presentation were developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education H326T230035. However, those contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government.